everyone. I'm Joseph Cotto, and before I say another word, CottoGottfried is sponsored by Alaska Chaga. To see why their chaga may be a great fit for you, please click on the link below. This show gets 10% of any purchase you make. In times like these, it is important to support businesses that are willing to support shows like this, so what are you waiting for? Check out Alaska Chaga. Also, do you want to understand the world around you and maybe even yourself a bit better than you do now? Are you looking for answers to some of life's greatest questions, even if they are the most difficult ones? Maybe you just want to learn something new. In any case, online great books may be just what you are looking for. When you sign up for a course there by following the link below, CottoGottfried gets $45. Learn about the past, insight on our present, and the future by learning at online great books. Knowledge is power. And speaking of knowledge, we have two very, very knowledgeable people on the show tonight. And I'm not sure who to say first because I don't want to insult anyone, but two knowledgeable guys, Adam Townsend and my esteemed co-host, Paul Gottfried. How's it going, gentlemen?
It's going so good, and thank you for including me in this. It's very exciting.
It's also going well with me. I'm far away from the COVID center in New York or Philadelphia, and feel remarkably safe.
Good. You're in
Pennsylvania.
Although
I'm only 19 miles from Lancaster, where we had notable disturbances yesterday that were reported even in the European press. But we saw nothing like that where I live.
Wow, I don't watch the news. I have no idea what's going on. Sometimes I go on Twitter and say. Sometimes I scroll through and I'm shocked and, I don't know what's going on. I love when people tell me because it's always like surprise to me. It's like,
right. This would be an unpleasant surprise if I were to tell you.
Yeah, definitely.
Some fellow got shot in the city of Lancaster by police and a bunch of people started rioting afterward. That's the nutshell, right, Paul?
Wow.
Well, there's more than that. I mean, the person had a history of mental illness, in quotation, and had stabbed a number of other people and had been put away and then was released and then was going after this policeman with his knife.
Gosh. Wow.
And the policeman shot him dead, which precipitated a riot.
Yeah, wow.
Lots of things precipitates riots nowadays, unfortunately. Anyway, tonight we're not going to be discussing riots. Thankfully,
we might.
We're going to be talking.
We might. I'm going to go outside and start a riot right now. I feel good about it.
I decline to encourage that, but what I will say is that
it sounds so easy. It sounds easy.
And nowadays, rioting is very easy. I mean, it just basically takes a couple of people getting together on social media and calling for dismay. It's scary, actually, how quickly this fire spreads. But life in the age of information technology. Anyhow, tonight we're going to be discussing what will happen in the event that Biden wins. People, I think most people now all watching this know that Adam expects Biden to win. Paul and I don't, but we're not here to debate the predictions tonight. We're here to talk about what will happen if Adam is correct and Biden does, in fact, pull it out. And I will say that Adam's take on what may be the case in the event that Biden does win is nothing that I can disagree with. It's a very detailed take, and I cannot, it's terrifying to me, but nothing there seems at all unlikely. So I will just say that before this begins, if you have a reasonable and responsible question or comment for the panel, please do leave it in the live chat as a super chat, but please leave it in sooner than later. Please don't leave it for the end. And obviously, neither Adam nor Paul nor myself are your financial advisors, so no questions of financial advice nature. Very strict on that. Thank you very much in advance. So anyway, Adam, looking at your prediction for a Biden victory, and this prediction was made on July the 8th of this year.
You got to go way back. You can't just kind of pick that tweet because I've been tweeting about these things consistently. I use Twitter as a timestamp, right? And I use it because most people will say something. Most people are very reactionary on Twitter, and they'll tweet both sides of something, and then they'll say I was right that time and forget about the time I was wrong because I could just delete that tweet, or I was in a drunken state or something. And I'm not. I'm a very consistent person, and I've just been going along with what I've seen since 2015, 2016. I mean, I'm just continuing that trend and kind of observing it, and just watching as it gets further away from reality. You get the trend, and you get the misconception, and it's a bubble, right? So I think of things in terms of financials, and in terms of stocks, and in terms of the markets, which is kind of my alma mater, I suppose. So I kind of transfer everything to financials, and I think of this as kind of a run up in Tesla stock. I expected Tesla to go up, and bubbles are bubbles, right? And, you can't fight the bubbles sometimes.
No, you can't. Although I will say, perhaps some bubbles pop sooner than others, and others are less predictable. But bubbles, the nature of them, I have no disagreement with what you just brought up. Now, as to what you think will happen in the event that Biden does win, I found this very interesting. Well, actually, I found all of it very interesting. But you are predicting a huge Biden electoral win. You say that he and mega corporations will say that he has a clear mandate after this win. I guess explain this a little bit, Adam, and then Paul will share his 2 cents.
Okay, well, so I think it's unfair to start there, because again, you're kind of putting a stake in the stream, and saying it starts there. And I'd like to choose a spot much earlier in its path and begin the stream there. So 2016, it really wasn't a surprise to me that Trump won. It was there were a lot of indicators, and the indicators were there from 2014, and everything was there. So it wasn't much of a surprise, but it also was part of the expectation that he was going to win, and that he wasn't going to win 2020, because he could win in 2016 as the insurgent, right? Because they were not prepared for the insurgent. They didn't have all the apparatus of state aligned against them, except in a very ad hoc way, right? It was done kind of a mixed match. They assembled a little bit of Google, a little bit of that. And at the same time, they're also relying on a lot of flawed algorithms that had been built with the very wrong profiles. It's how you train these algorithms and AIs. And it was, with they had 4 years to improve those. So it's why wouldn't they be doing that? And they've done such a good job along the periphery of guarding the periphery from what's outside of it, that I don't see any opportunity for Trump to win. So now I wonder what happens when Biden wins. What's it look like? And it's not only that, but they've also taken out the recourse for people who might object to it, right? And they've taken out everything one at a time. So you're saying to me, well, Adam's predicting this win, but that's kind of inaccurate, because all of I'm observing is they've taken all the pawns. They've taken all of his pawns and his queen and his bishop, and his king is running around with a knight. And it's I see I perhaps there's a way for a person with a king and 2 knights to checkmate their opponent who's fully armed, but it's not easy, right? So,
Paul?
Yeah, the way I see it, what Adam is saying, is a plausible possibility. I mean, for 4 years, the establishment, what I call, the counter-revolutionary left, because on cultural, social questions, they're on the left, but they are very much in favor of accumulating capital and living well, at least the leaders of this establishment. For 4 years, they've been going after Trump. And he hasn't always handled himself very well, but I don't know exactly how I would handle myself if I'm getting pummeled 24 hours a day. Not only here, by the way, but throughout Western Europe, Canada, Australia, throughout the Anglo. He's getting absolutely hammered for anything. 99% of it is unjust. These people are absolutely shameless about lying, but it is nonstop. It is relentless, and he doesn't respond particularly well. The question is, what do they do once they win? And I think that's where the problems will begin, as I try to show in that short commentary I wrote on the counter-revolutionary left. What you're going to see is basically the leftist, the elite, the establishment elite, trying to get rid of all the troublemakers whom it has activated in order to get rid of Trump. So what do you do with Black Lives Matter? What do you do with Antifa? All the people whom the Democrats have been close to, in some cases subsidizing. Now you don't need them anymore, but they're not necessarily going to go away. And one of the things I propose is the equivalent of Hitler's Night of the Long Knives. They may have to get rid of some of these people. And in any case, they're going to attribute their continued activity to the far right. Something, by the way, which we saw in Lancaster yesterday. The Governor Wolf announced that the troublemakers were white nationalists. All of our local channels began to repeat that they were white nationalists. The problem is they showed mostly Black people waving Black Lives Matter signs, and it became very hard to sustain that narrative after a while, so they just gave up on it. But they tried the same thing in Minneapolis. And I think this is exactly what the counter-revolutionary left is going to do to get rid of the troublemakers. I don't think they're going to give us a Green New Deal. I think that's just going to go. I don't think they're going to pay off reparations unless they have to. What you're simply going to get is a harder version of the Obama administration, but with lots of favors to large corporation, to the woke capitalists who've helped them, not all of whom are lunatic leftists or cultural Marxists. I mean, some of them are just trying to buy influence. They don't want blacks to attack them. They want them as customers. They don't want to hire them to work for them, but they don't want to be picketed. So, they go, and there is no real counter-revolutionary surge from the other side. The right is just about dead, as far as I can see.
The right is and again, I'm as you know, I'm kind of much more sympathetic to the left side, right? So, I just want to refresh the memories on that one. That is kind of my own. I wouldn't say bias, but I try and, as much as possible, I'm trying to observe all of this as objectively as I can, and I'm trying to use this as perhaps as an experiment. For the last few years, I've considered myself, or I've tried to, a very disembodied intellect, right? So as I was going through with Joseph at an earlier time, I've kept a log. I call this period. So I've been thinking about what happens when the megacorps take over for a long time, right? And maybe it's because I've enjoyed science fiction so much as a kid. But your question from your book, after liberalism, is what happens after liberalism, right? So there seems to be some type of chasm. There seems to be some type of chasm that's been jumped in. When you go into science fiction movies, typically you go into Blade Runner, and from the time you sit down, the megacorps have already run, right? When you sit down in Rollerball, the megacorps have already won. So what's very interesting is this is the prequel to that, right? This is, there's the Planet of the Apes, right? Which is just such a wonderful movie. And when I first saw it, I had no idea they were on Earth. It was shocking to me. I was a kid. And then you see the kind of prequel to it, how this happened. So I've been trying as much as I can to meticulously observe and chronicle what's happening now. I expected this. I expected the megacorps to take over. I expected that it would be successful because politicians were no longer responsive to the electorate, right? We saw that they were retreating. We saw a lot of shifts that were happening with people's use of language. People were protesting hate language, whatever like the technical word for that, what they call it is. And so, it was clear to me that we were in that part, that we were in the prequel, that the prequel had really begun. And I just wanted to make sure I caught a careful chronicling of it as it occurs, because I also realized that it's happening much faster than the mind can perceive, right? All of this is happening so fast, and the brain is not designed to be able to comprehend and synthesize all of this information. So what happens is, some part is deliberate, some part isn't, but, people's minds can only hold so many thoughts at a time, in the frontal lobe. So, clearly the media is trying to overwhelm all that. And a person is just kind of reduced to very simple dichotomies that are made within a fraction of a second. So when you say that, they attributed it to the right, to whatever the right is, I don't know, how these things are assigned, but to the whatever they call these things, I don't know what they call. I don't really pay attention to that stuff. But to the right, that's the way that will stick with people who are already biased against the right, because as soon as they hear that word, they make a decision rule, right? And then it's like a postcard, and it gets filed into their head. And I'm really fascinated by it because the decision rules are getting quicker. There's an urgency to it that never happened before. It used to be you'd get 20 minutes to make up your mind, right? It used to be when an employer would say, hey, do you want the job or not? Walk around the block a few times and come back and tell me. That those decision rules now are happening within fractions of a second. Mm-hmm. And it's just fascinating to me. So I've been trying to record all this and capture all this. And part of that is the Biden win, right? Is what happens next with the Biden win. What happens next, with, how Trump has been treated, whether fairly or unfairly. I'll let other people decide that, because, that's that requires history, right? That requires kind of look back. And my argument is also that history will never permit that look back. So I think our modern history is going to begin with like a Joe Biden, because they can present them as an FDR too. And while as Trump is clearly, they have not permitted Trump to open up the profligate reservoir. And that's been a real constraint on Trump, that they wouldn't let him open up all those spigots, at least as freely as they would like. He hasn't been congenial to power, and they haven't been congenial to him. But, once Biden comes in, as Paul said, there will be a reconciliation. I don't think there's going to be a Green New Deal that's as presented, but clearly there's going to be something that has to tame people down. And also you're going to need to redirect all of those social movement programs, because they're not going to go away. There's zero chance they're going to go away. Zero. So you're going to need to redirect them. And they're going to be unhireable. You're not going to be able to hire these people. So you also are going to need to have a world of contractors, because if you're a corporation, right? If you're an Amazon and you have a choice of there's a troublemaker, right? They're a troublemaker. It's clearly, you've got a profile of them. They've done all the tests. They have got a clear social history. Now you have a choice. You're going to bring them on as a W-2 employee, in which case they create a lot of risk, headline risk, right? Headline risk, and other types of risk. Or you're going to have them as a contractor, in which case there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of legislation, and there's a lot of protections between the legal entanglements between you and that employee. So you're going to have all these people are going to be redirected to new things. And I think they're going to be redirected to whatever presents itself as the Green New Deal, to a Greta type of thing. I think we'll see a reemergence of that, because these people are already activated. They're not going to be deactivated. They're going to be increasingly activated, become increasingly violent, and they're going to be used to suppress other types of dissent, middle-class dissent that comes from taxation that you have in Europe, where you have wealth extraction through these VAT taxes and all these other type of things. While as in Europe, it's a little bit easier to quiet all those protests down, or it was easier to quiet all those protests down. In America, it's not so easy to stop mass dissent. So, it's interesting. It's fun to watch, right? It's interesting.
I would argue that most of the dissent, or the contradictions and tensions will come on the left, because I don't think the right counts for very much. And by the right, I mean the kind of people who sort of would push back in the name of history, tradition, Christianity, middle-class values, whatever. These people are not very strong, and they've been largely gutted or neutralized by the conservative movement, which is thoroughly opportunistic, and is basically concerned about its sponsors and representing a sort of civil opposition that's trying to engage in discourse with the left, if the left allows it to. But I don't think they really have to worry very much about a right-wing opposition to take power. What's going to happen, is there'll be tension within the leftist coalition between the corporate capitalist wing people like Michael Bloomberg and perhaps yourself. I don't know if you identify with those people. And then the more radical types. Some of the more radical types can be dealt with, as I said, because the media can present them really as playing into the hands of the far right. They can play the kind of game that the governor tried to play, saying the white nationalists are behind them. I think all the good cards are with the left. To me, it's a question of how they use them, and you don't have to worry about a contradiction between, you know, the narrative the left gives you and reality, because most people live in the reality that is created by the left. And this will be more and more the case with immigration, because more and more people will come in from other places who buy into leftist ideas because they view themselves as minorities, for one thing. I think that's an important factor. So with immigration, the left will become even stronger. It will obviously make citizenship more readily available to people, and it will probably, you know, throw citizenship at illegals. Without very much. Yeah, I think all of this is going to happen, or it could happen, could very easily happen after a Biden win.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I mean, I'm in agreement. I don't see the right really presenting much opposition. They've fractured. They've become more celebrities rather than ideologically coherent type of people.
Right.
So, you know, I don't really watch TV. So, you know, I kind of see them and I like it because I see them as this kind of a creation. And then I'll see them like 2 months later and they'll be saying the exact opposite thing. So I think that's kind of fun to watch. And I observed that with, I forget, these kids that were, one of them was mocked for having a smirk or something. And they threw those kids.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it was interesting because I'm on kind of the other side of those guys, but I was like, you know, let's give these kids a chance. It's horrible. These are young people, but they're, you know, Twitter and social media. It's interesting because it's been it's a plebiscite, right? Pretty soon they're going to complete it and just execute you there. So it's really interesting about how these things spread. And I'm so interested in the subject. And I would say you're right. I mean, I don't see any opposition coming from the right. I don't see them as a viable thing. But, you know, today's left becomes tomorrow's right. And then, you know, the next year's left becomes, you know, 2 years. These cycles are happening much quicker. So, you know, you've got to take all of the history that you're such an authority on. And, you know, we were discussing that before the show, the books that I've read of yours, and you've got to compress that down because these cycles are happening much quicker. There's never in history been the cycles and the speed of them that we're observing now. So those positive feedback loops are going to break. So right now you're in the middle of this. Again, I look at everything as, you know, financials, but again, you're going to look at those, you're going to see those positive feedback loops that right now I expect to propel Biden in. However a person thinks about that. I'm not trying to make any assessment on him as a candidate or as a president, but, you know, right now there's clearly a positive feedback loop, and it's kind of in between a person's mind and reality. There's a lot of distortion happening, right? So
but on cultural issues, you cannot go to the left of where the left is right now. You know, they're willing to allow you to kill your infant so women can express their rights, or men can say they're women and go into their showers because they decide subjectively to change their. So you can't move to the left of this. The question is how long will it take before the so-called conservative movement catches up? And, you know, it might take a week, 2 weeks. They're absolutely unprincipled celebrities.
Yeah,
that we're talking about.
That's really interesting. And, you know, I've watched the show a bit. So I've also seen you say that the left in America is the far right of Europe. I think that was something that you said. I thought that was very interesting, or at least the right of Europe. Oh, no. I think you had said that Americans have never seen the real far right that exists within Europe. I think that's the way you phrased it. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there is a right that exists in Europe, but I think in Western Europe, it's not particularly strong. Now, what I was saying is that the left in Europe, and it's a cultural Marxist left, is more leftist than our left. The United States is relatively conservative because everything we see here is more extreme, let's say, in a place like Germany or Sweden or Canada.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So Talking about the right a little bit, it's very interesting because one of the things that I really wanted to chronicle within that is kind of my disappointment to the reaction to the coronavirus on both sides. I thought it was very interesting because there was a lot of there was a lot of distortions. There was a lot of loops and there was a lot of disequilibrium that was occurring on both sides. And it was really interesting to watch. And, I've kept a chronicle of this, so I don't want to make any assessment of its morbidity or any of that. I just want to look at factually what was presented to us when it was initiated within China, how it came, how it spread, the information that was possessed by the Chinese Communist Party to the World Health Organization, to certain other types of things. And it's interesting because I disagreed with a lot of the way it was treated. One of the things I couldn't understand is there was no commensurate values. Nobody they had decided that they were going to shut down the world, but they never presented any type of commensurate economics to doing so. And the right was just as eager to shut things down for the most part as the left was, without presenting. There was no interrogatories. There was no TV interlocutors. There was just nothing happening. There was no discourse. There was no arguments permitted. The simple argument was, again, that decision rule. Either you shut it down or you don't. And you had to make that decision with a real urgency and then stick to it. So you had your own feedback loop that was occurring there. And I was very disappointed in the conservatives because of how eager they were. And it seemed to me, and at that time, one of the tweets, I think you may have seen, Joe, but I'd like you to include that within my body of Twitter work, I guess, is that I expect the right to realign, to reconcile itself with the left. Because now that they've been mobilized into this kind of something that looks like science, it resembles science, it allows people to speak in a vernacular that sounds like science. They all are armed with graphs and they all are people of the Enlightenment now. So I think that once COVID, eases as it is now, they're all going to move into this Green New Deal, into this extremism that, I guess, Gretopian, right? Greta-opian type of stuff. They're all going to move in that direction. They've all been mobilized. Even the right has been mobilized to do that. So I think if there is, resistance, it's going to come from the middle class because they're really going to get killed with the taxes. So they're going to get killed with the VAT taxes. They're going to get killed with all the energy taxes that the Germany and Europe suffer through. And there's been a lot of protest in Germany for it. So it's going to be interesting. I think the conservatives will be just as diligent in shutting down that middle class and using science and using all the vernacular and science sounding type of thing. So I'm really interested in it. It's going to be fun. Fun times ahead. Really good.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because two things I want to go over about your predictions for a Biden win. VAT, which you had mentioned, and energy regulations, and both of those would very, very strongly impact the middle class, and it would probably produce a political backlash of seismic proportions. I'm not quite certain as to what that backlash would look like, though, who would be the beneficiary of it in politics. I don't see the two-party system ending anytime soon. If I had to take a guess, I would say that it would benefit the Republicans in a midterm in 2022. Any thoughts on that, Adam, and then Paul, obviously?
But I'm not sure what you mean by thoughts on it, because there's I don't think about things in terms of Republicans or Democrats, right? We're kind of beyond a lot of the legacy type of things, and I think that's part of that fast cycle. I look at this as, and I've described it as the fastest roll of power in history. I look at people more aligning themselves with what the corporate interests are. I don't think the future is going to be what people expect it to be. I think we're losing those things that you've attached yourself to. I think we've lost them. I think we've lost. One of the things I found so interesting about QAnon, which I knew nothing about. I knew nothing about it. And then they found out or prosecuted or something, some guy who led it, or something, who had like a chat room or something for it, who was like an IT person who was very smart and he was really involved in it. And I didn't realize it was like this worldwide thing. And what it really does show you is how much those gatekeepers and the megacorps are taking over, and at the same time, how territorial sovereignty is out the window, right? The territorial sovereignty is gone. You're now looking at functional sovereignty. So whether that and whether it helps Republicans in 2022, I think I agree with Paul just so much that today's, however you phrase it, Paul, is just so effective. So I don't want to rephrase your own words, but it's a race to see who gets to the left first, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
right. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely correct. It's a race to see who goes to the left first on cultural, social issues, though not necessarily on economic ones. And I don't really see much of a future for the Green New Deal, even under the Democrats.
Agreed.
Agreed. I mean, there's just too much corporate wealth behind the Democratic Party. Michelle Obama's friends do not really strike me as Marxist or socialist. They're cultural, social radicals. They at least pretend to hate white people, although many of them are white themselves. And they probably hardly ever speak to black people except for Michelle Obama. But we're talking about a kind of cultural posture that these people are striking, and support for the cultural social left. I mean, LGBT, Black Lives Matter, and so forth. Now, Black Lives Matter may be theoretically Marxist. I don't think they'll get to first base with their Marxism. What I do think is quite possible is the Republicans may not be able to win a midterm, because by then so many people will have been enfranchised, providing the Democratic Party can take back the Senate. I mean, we'll get illegals, we'll have open borders for a while till they can get a permanent Democratic majority, and Republicans may never win unless a few of them are allowed to sneak by because they're like Mitt Romney or John Kasich, somebody like that, or Charlie Baker in Massachusetts. But I really don't see any future for the Republican Party. I think the Democrats can complete a transformational process if Biden wins. I don't know if he'll really be the president. He seems to be in an advanced state of senility. Will basically be ruled by Kamala Harris and her people. I don't think Kamala Harris is really a socialist either. No, she belongs to the wealthiest country club in L.A. Her husband is this wealthy Jewish liberal lawyer or something. I don't buy any of these people. Are not socialists. They're cultural elitist leftists, cultural leftists. And this is what you're going to get if they take power. I've been arguing against the socialist scenario for years now. Being a European intellectual social historian, I don't see any of this happening in the United States. And every night on Fox News, Sean Hannity drags out poor Bernie Sanders. This is the future. No, it is not the future. Bernie Sanders is nothing. Bernie Sanders was an authentic, admirable Marxist. He has now turned himself over into an LGBT fanatic in order to stay relevant in the Democratic Party. He used to be against immigration 10 years ago. Now he wants open borders. Right? Yeah. He was against immigration because he was a good Marxist. So this has nothing to do with Marxism or socialism. It's a cultural, social transformation that we're witnessing.
Yeah, and so that's interesting because, that's it's part of what leads me here, right? Because that was years ago when I was very interested because I didn't have the definitions of any of these things. So I was ill-equipped to argue even with myself. I was aware of the domain of my own ignorance, and I was determined to resolve that. So I think at first I really wanted definitions. So I think I read I don't even remember. I read one book, from an author, and I really didn't like it. It really wasn't very satisfactory because it didn't give me the complexity, right? My mind can handle more than a couple of sentences at a time, and I'm really not into memes. So it was very unsatisfying. So I did read your book on fascism. And I know you've written a lot, but I found it very helpful. And so I agree with you. None of these things resemble anything that you've written about. And I think of that as really, and I think Chris Hedges described it in a very interesting way. He called it a reverse corporate totalitarian state, or he called it an inverse corporate totalitarianism. I thought that's a really interesting phrase, right? They really have hollowed out our own political structural systems. And, I think a lot of Roman history. I've studied it. And I always have this image of all of our elites having moved to Ravenna and just kind of living, enjoying the life there and letting the gates to Rome be opened. And
right.
That's where we are. But I look at it realistically. So I don't really mourn the loss of what was. I would just like a little bit more authority given to what will be, because they're really it doesn't feel like there's that kind of guiding hand that there should be. And I think that's more dangerous, is that there's really not a guiding hand, rather than I can tolerate the transformation because I have to, right? We all have to tolerate the transformation, but it doesn't feel like it's being like our even the fact that our elites have permitted so much violence just shows you kind of the cruelty that they're employing and their own kind of disconnect from the pain that they're causing. And I don't feel like there's a guiding hand. So I see the transformation, and I see, like you said, that there's not going to be any disruption going on within the fossil fuel industry or anything else beyond some type of hyperbole. But I just wish there was a little bit more guidance, and that should it be Biden or Kamala, or even should it be Trump, right? That they can speak of actual issues rather than social issues, and just give people some type of a way of setting aside expectations so they can plan a little bit for the future. Because I do think the environment they've created forecloses for most people the idea of a future, if that makes any sense.
No, I totally agree. I think you're right.
And from Top Tier Scholarship, he asks, will alt-right ever get competent leaders? This is very interesting, because even though Paul, Adam, and myself agree that there is obviously no coherent right in the United States, the alt-right has taken an interesting turn that I think merits some discussion here. I look at the few people who are still affiliated with it online. They're on Twitter, if they haven't been banned yet, and other platforms, and they're basically echoing whatever it is that the left says nowadays. And they're also adopting a sort of dialectic that is very victim-based. They sound a lot like campus lefties did about maybe 5 or so years ago, before they went totally SJW. I'd be safer, more like 10. But I think that the alt-right, I don't think they'll ever get competent leaders. What I think will happen, Top Tier, is that they'll just morph into the left. That's the way I see them going. I think it's already taking place. You see like Spencer endorsing Joe Biden, and then a lot of other people adopting a leftist sounding line anytime Trump does anything decent with Israel. So I think that the alt-right will never get competent leaders. I think it's just going to become part of the left. But that's a fascinating, I think, evolution of that movement. Then it went from being this thing on the fringe right to, I think, a lot of its guys just being on the left. I know that Spencer himself has even disavowed things that he used to champion, like white nationalism, whatever, and he claims to be like a multiculturalist now, who's no longer interested in preserving traditional Western society, if I've got that right. So there definitely is a trend toward the left among these people. Adam, then Paul, anything to say about what Top Tier brought up?
Oh, Paul, would you be kind enough to speak on that first before me?
Yeah, yeah. I don't really agree with everything that Joseph has said. I think what you get on the alt-right is desperation. And some of them take seriously what used to be my maxim, which I took from the Communist Party of France: the worse, the better. That if you bring to power the most extreme leftists, will cause so much chaos, then we'll take power next. Of course, that's what the communists tried with Hitler. Remember, nach Hitler das Verkommen wir an die Macht, that after Hitler we come to power. They did in 1945, after millions of them were killed. But I think this expresses desperation. By the way, I'm no longer denounced by the conservatives as a white nationalist, something I never was. I'm now called a contrad reactionary rightist.
I can live with that.
I criticized this idiot Brad Thompson in an article, and he said he does not take seriously anything I say because I'm a tradcon reactionary rightist. You don't have to take me seriously. So the people on the right who have any intelligence or originality have been totally ostracized because they are not really acceptable in a dialogue with the left. And this is what the conservative movement wants. It wants to dialogue. It wants, people from the New York Times and the Atlantic to come over and dialogue, and they can show what nice people they are. And we can all agree, and maybe they can persuade them to become a little less radical. So I really don't think that the alt-right is not going to get leaders. It has no chance of getting power. And the conservative movement itself, I think, is simply, what is that term used? Sort of like sort of a filler, or I'm thinking of the German. I can't think of the Lückenbücher, which is something which
is one way of putting it.
No, the thing which just sort of fills, maybe a placeholder. That's a good word.
Oh,
it is a placeholder because you need an opposition of some kind, because that's what democracy is supposed to be about. So we have, I don't know, Dana Perino or some of these other idiots on Fox, who represent the acceptable opposition. And I think Adam is right about this. I think, one day they're going to say this. The other thing that I always make fun of is their attempt to fill their show with more minorities and a lifestyle iconoclast than CNN. So you go from one gay to another gay. They even had, what's his name? Caitlyn Jenner was transgendered, Republican, conservative. They're playing their shtick, which I don't think is going to get them anywhere, but maybe their sponsors like it. But it certainly doesn't convince anybody. It just looks ludicrous. But they really cannot move beyond the sort of media carnival phase. And the people who are on the right don't get listened. The bright people don't get listened to anyhow. So I think this may be the fate of the American right. It's going to go nowhere.
Yeah, well, so may I go now? Would that be all right? May I be a response to that now?
I think.
Yeah.
Just saying one thing, if you don't mind, Adam. Alt-right pretty much is centered around Spencer and some other people who I'm not going to bring up here, and they are uniformly now parroting leftist talking points. So I don't see how their transition toward the left is not, to say it's well in motion is an understatement.
Yeah,
I think they're already pretty much there.
Would you include Greg Johnson? Greg Johnson and the cross-current people are very far on the right. They're also fanatical anti-Semites and neo-Nazis, but they're very far on the right. You cannot say that they're imitating the left. They violently denounce the left every day.
Yeah, so
but I do believe most of them wind up voting for the left.
May I have the opportunity to?
Sure, Adam, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I do want to again kind of clave my own position, if that's all right with you guys. And I do want to say that had Paul been continued to be identified as an alt-right, I wouldn't have felt comfortable being here, right? And he is an intellectual, he's an academic, so I have total respect for him. As I said before this broadcast began, again, his book was very helpful, and After Liberalism I thought was great. I think it's perhaps a classic of its type, because it was very helpful for me to give me some conceptual framework, right? But why would this is kind of the liberal in me, right? Is why would anybody want any type of a resurrection, right? If that's what it is, because I do think they're dead, of an alt-right. I mean, I don't think that if the alt-right is, as the narration somewhat given to them that accompanies them, right, how the narrator announces them, I don't think that's necessarily a desirable thing, because I don't really think that's any political opposition. That may present itself as some type of social resistance, but it's ineffective. I've seen them on YouTube. It's very interesting, because I do watch some of this stuff on YouTube. I don't watch TV. I watch YouTube. I see all the lectures on YouTube. There's some really incredible stuff that still is on YouTube, so it's really cool. And I see some of these people, and you know, I don't like them, but you know, somehow they kind of pop up because I don't care. And I've seen some of them, and I don't really like them as people. I think they're just kind of click mongers, and they're just going to know where the clicks is, and you know, that's it. And they're you know, they're lemmings, and they'll fall off of any cliff that you know that has the most money to greet them at the bottom. So I don't think their demise. I certainly don't celebrate, because I don't even know what they are. But I don't know whether any type of a restoration of them is a good thing, because I think ultimately, if you want to have some type of a bringing back of, you know, right now we're seeing a transformation, right? You're seeing it from, again, you know, we're seeing the Constitution being swapped in for terms of service, right? I mean, that's obvious, okay? And I don't think you're going to be able to fight that battle and to win, to get some type of you know, to enlist the people necessary to fight that battle to get the Constitution back by what presents itself as the alt-right, because they're not. What I've seen is not intellectual. Now, I will say that I do enjoy Dalrymple and for some reason, Theodore Dalrymple, right? Theodore Dalrymple. And for some reason, they call him alt-right or something, or they give him whatever the nasty names are. So I don't really know how these terms work, because he's not that. There's no way he's that. He's just extremely articulate, and he's shared his experiences in the hospital, which is reality. So, you know, it's but whatever the alt-right is, I don't know if it helps. What, you know, right now, you know, basically the megacorps have enlisted this phalanx of people that are going out onto the streets and tearing down. You know, these are the four olds, right? They're employing all the tools, you know, that Mao used with the four olds, tearing down all the old rituals, and they're doing it really effectively. You know, that little red book is becoming the book of aphorisms. If you go to any bookstore, Michelle Obama's book is there, right? So you know, they're kind of indistinguishable. That you know, a good citizen must now possess, right, Michelle Obama's book, and must be able to quote from it. And I love Michelle Obama, so I'm not being critical of her. I'm just talking about the availability of those aphorisms, you know. And so, you know, if that phalanx that the megacorps have employed doesn't necessarily, the battle for them doesn't necessarily have to be Sparta versus Athens. I think you just need a lot of true intellectuals to be able to fight that battle, and to enlist the middle class to be able to kind of forcefully, you know, eject the DC elite. Because in a few years, it's going to be too late. And then who cares about the alt-right? Because in a few years, right now, what you're seeing Antifa and those social movements. And let's not even look at the merits of their causes, right? Because there's a lot of ambiguity in them, right? Because there's some real causes, and then there's some, you know, insurgencies that are infused within these things. So those are clearly right now being positioned against as a phalanx, even against the DC elites, right? Because they were in Georgetown, and they were shouting down the DC elites. So the way I see it is those Amazon elites are displacing the DC elites. They're really going through a total transformation. And I don't see how the alt-right, whatever that is, you know, with their 50,000 radical followers who are willing to get beat up because they want to hold up a flag, I don't see how that brings us to any resolution. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I don't think you're wrong in the slightest.
Go ahead. There will be a resolution, but the resolution will be when the corporate capitalist and the counter-revolutionary left get rid of these people. It will not come from the right. The right is too weak. It makes no difference what the alt-right is. The alt-right is ineffective. Dalrymple, whose real name is Anthony Daniels, you may know, whom I know quite well, studiously avoids any controversial political issue. He told me that, and it's very obvious from reading him. He does not want his writing career to be destroyed by taking controversial political positions. I don't think the conservative movement is going to ride to our rescue either. So I think if there's any resolution of the conflict, it'll come between the counter-revolutionary leftist elites and the people they put into the street. People Tucker Carlson refers to as the Biden voters. And those Biden voters will have to be dealt with. I don't think it makes any difference what I say, what Richard Spencer says, what Dalrymple says. There is no effective right in the United States. There is no effective conservative movement. And the conflict will be decided when the left turns against other elements of the left, as far as I can see.
I think that happens very quickly, and that's why I think you're going to see continued. Because keep in mind, and Joseph and I were discussing this before, and Joseph, you're just so learned. It was such a remarkable conversation we had, and thank you very much for that. And
very well.
Yeah. And so we were discussing my familiarity with kind of China, right? And I can speak about it with within I know what I know about China, and what I know about China, I'm really a specialist on, and can speak of it with real authority. I don't have to. Yeah. So in any event, so I've been observing China just for a whole bunch of different reasons. Number one, financial and my investments and everything else. But I've also seen them as a leading indicator, because I was very interested in the tactics that Xi employed and that the Chinese Communist Party employed, and to kind of constrain their own dissent, because there was a tremendous amount of dissent when you have 400 million angry Marxists, right, who are testful of the system, and their own transformations of the Constitution, and how much now they've taken out the role of the Parliament to where it's not even emissarial anymore. It just does nothing, right? Their own Congress does nothing anymore. And you have a lot of poverty there, and at the same time, the Belt and Road has really failed for them. You're seeing all these countries that are completely indebted to the China Exim Bank. They can't service it on their GDP. So you're seeing a collapse within China also. So keep in mind, what's happening here is also happening in China. It's just that there's not a lot of TV cameras on the mainland to film it, right? And they're much so. But so I saw some of the same things that that are happening here now in China 2 years ago. I could talk about Toshi, which is their let's call it their equivalent of YouTube, and the founder of that is Yiming, had to make a public apology. In fact, it was called an apology that he posted on their equivalent of like a Medium, if you know that platform, and it was an apology for not being in observance of the what's called the Xi four consciousnesses, which is you have to be and adhere, you have to be obedient to a whole bunch of things. But so it's very interesting because they were ahead of their time. So it's a leading indicator for what we're experiencing now.
And there's actually now there are quite a few questions in the live chat, so we'll have to go through them pretty quickly. I made the last call before in the live chat, so this should be fun. Everybody, fasten your seatbelt. There's some good stuff here. From Wojak Woes. Why are the media and politicians so silent on Netflix Cuties release? I don't believe Alex Jones style conspiracies, but why is this film necessary? It's not necessary, Wojak. I've heard of the movie. I did not see, even though I have Netflix, I did not see it, and I will not see it. But I think they're silent on it because they don't want to go up against Netflix, and they don't want to go up against a social media mob, which would be thrown out against them. And I think Adam has been talking about the ramifications of being persecuted on social media. It also, I think, is seen as a form of cultural degeneracy by the people who support this film. And it's thought of as if you criticize it, then you are in favor of some sort of right-wing reactionary whatever, when that's obviously not necessarily the case. So I think that's what's going on here. But obviously the film is entirely unnecessary. And it is a very sad testament to the state of our modern age. Adam and Paul, anything to say about what Wojak brought up?
Paul, I must always go after you. You're
No,
you're
I
a
insist
wonderful
this time
person.
that you go first.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think a lot of these things require just a lot of historical record, and I can't speak of it. I can't speak of the philosophy of these things that are driving them and that we're seeing kind of emergent now. So I think there's a lot of complexity to it, and I don't want to reduce it to something as simple as if a person who objects to that movie, Cuties, or objects to the poster or whatever it is, objects to it, is clearly they're also associated with a right-wing person, with wearing a MAGA hat and wearing all the props of a Trump voter. But clearly that's not only it. I mean, clearly there is a fetishization. I have a little bit of a lisp. A fetishization that has some historical framework to it and context to it. So I can't speak of it, that part of it, with any authority.
Paul?
Yeah, I think there is inherent in the culture, what I call the cultural Marxist left, which is not economic Marxist, but the cultural radicalism that is now pretty much overwhelmed the Western world, a hatred for traditional Judeo-Christian morals, and gender roles, and male-female distinctions, or this, of course, does not prevent the same people from enforcing the most rigid kind of rules against sexism and people who are not supportive of feminism. But this is done very selectively. If you're Harvey Weinstein, you can get away with anything you want because he gives money to the Democratic Party. And this is true in other countries as well. I mean, these are selectively enforced rules against sexism. But anything that was considered to be perverse or unnatural sex is in right now. Now, the question is, will this remain the case after if Joe Biden wins and Kamala Harris becomes our next acting president? And that is an interesting question, because I think some of the so-called progressive capitalists and people in the deep state who are supporting the mobs and supporting the what would seem by traditional standards to be unnatural sex, or using kids in pornography and so forth, they might have second thoughts about this once they are in power.
Now,
there's no reason to. Yeah.
Do you think that that's because of their own concern that it will bleed into their own kind of elite circles? Like their daughter is going to come home, and do you think their concern will be that there will be leakage of that into their own elite, circle and family units? And do you think that would be a worry for them?
I think you're asking what's really a rhetorical question. Of course, that's the reason they're they think it's going to leak into their own family relations. It's not so good. And at that point, they're going to become very, very concerned. I mean, they see their daughters not get married and have kids, and then, goes on to have a sex change or something like that. They don't want to see this. They don't want to see their 10-year-old daughters engaging in sex or something like this.
So, yeah. Do you see a way in the future where you're just going to have the elites never and the plebs? I don't know what you want to call them, right? The elites and the non-elites. Okay. Do you think you're ever going to have it where they're just not going to coexist? Where they're just
this is the argument, if you remember, of Charles Murray's book, in which he discusses the two different Americas. And in which I don't buy the entire argument. I don't think our upper class represent, the WASP patrician class of, let's say, 1900. They're very, very different. And they're much more radical. And I think in many ways, they're much more pernicious. The other one, I have nostalgia for. But I think these people do enforce all kinds of moral laws in their own group. And I think he's right about this. They don't seem to care much how blacks behave, because they're going to use them as a revolutionary force anyhow against the white people they don't like, the deplorables.
Can we see now kind of, and I think about it as a caste system, and it's inaccurate, but I want some ways to visualize it, right? Do you think we can see kind of this hereditary aristocrat that never meets, like in a third world environment, that really never interacts with out anything outside of their class. Like they are just a permanent Hamptons enclave.
Yes, I think that's exactly what you're saying. And there are any number of books about the overclass in America, which are usually quite liberal on all these social, cultural issues, are liberal Democrats politically, or even to the left of that, but assume they're going to remain in control, and they will be able to remain the sort of dominant caste. They will remain the Brahmin caste. And, their kids will never encounter working class or white people, or let alone underclass. Or
But
I've seen these people; they exist.
But they still have that exposure to everything that kind of, everything that's cascading down, right? I mean, there is no retreat from what's going on socially right now. There's no place to retreat. There's not even your mind you can retreat to, because they've infiltrated that pretty well also. So those kids are still going to be watching the same movies, watching the same sporting events, and I don't see how they can escape. And their language. I mean, these people some of them are really stupid. They just don't read. So they're still vulnerable to the same things as everybody else is.
Yes. I agree. They're still going to be hit by the same, toxic cultural waste, that they don't mind, being inflicted on other groups. It is going to definitely affect their own families and how they live. And I've known such people, and then they're always surprised that their kids don't turn out exactly the way they are. But the kid also, I think many of the kids do take over the values that these parents profess hypocritically, and try to live them out. Those are the ones running around the streets blowing up buildings with Black Lives Matter. Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Miss Graber in New York.
I know Joe wants to get to other questions, but it's interesting because one of the the thesis behind Biden winning is that there's this referential type of loop, right? And there's this positive loop that just is, it's kind of like there's an endless game of the liar's paradox, and it just keeps on getting worse and worse. And, they keep on elevating, the lies. So it's really interesting that, that loop just keeps on going on. And at a certain point, it's got to be interrupted because it's kind of like a stock bubble, right? And it's just interesting at what point, I think we lost Paul, but it's just interesting at what point, kind of reality has to interfere with that loop.
Paul is still here. I still see him. I hope that Adam does too. But everything looks fine on my end. I'll just say before I read the next thing from Joseph Jojo, I think that there will be parallel entertainment, parallel media venues eventually, a lot of different things that are essentially created for people that are from different strata of society. And I think that will, to some extent, mitigate some of the issues that Paul had brought up about kids becoming what their parents hypocritically want, but obviously really do not. We'll see how that goes, but I do see that happening eventually. I don't know when it would or exactly how it would, but I think it will happen eventually.
I want to get onto other questions, but I don't know if Paul had a chance to hear in his on his brief vacation. But ultimately, that loop, right, that just keeps on going on, and that, I guess you can call it a trend, just like a stock, that liberal trend that just keeps on going higher and higher, and they keep on challenging each other for a greater perversion, perhaps. I don't know if that's appropriate, but ultimately, reality has to interfere with that. And does it interfere with it in 5 years when it could be bad, right? It keeps on getting worse and worse. It could be bad in 5 years. Or does it interfere, as Paul said, after Biden wins, where they're just going to try and present everything as a return to civility? So I don't know.
From Joseph Jojo.
We're missing Paul, and I think all of us should attempt to read his lips. This is fascinating.
Sorry, Paul. Did you want to say anything? I didn't think you did.
We can't hear him. His volume.
Oh, we can't.
No, I said we're going to try and read. I said we're going to try and read his lips. This is a challenge for all of us.
Paul, you're here, but you're muted. That's the thing. I didn't hear anything from you, so I thought you didn't want to go on. Okay, yeah. If you just hit your microphone, you should be fine. The microphone button on StreamYard. No, I didn't even see that. Just let it back in the conversation. There we go.
I enjoy the challenge because, Paul, what you missed reminds me of that episode of The Odd Couple where they can't get Felix onto the plane, and he's looking up, and then he looks out the window, and he says he can read their lips, and he says, I sense great danger in engine number 2. So I was trying to read his lips with that. So
I love that show.
Yeah. Paul sensed great danger in engine number 2, and he was trying to warn us.
No, when I have to say, when I lived in Washington, D.C. about 30 years ago, I lived outside of Washington, and you could really see the class system working. Most of the government bureaucrats spent all their time trying to get their kids into elite universities. They put these stickers on their cars. The only minorities you see were the people who came in to clean their houses, but they were all on the left and very often on the far left. But it did not interfere with their lives. Basically, it was what they were telling us was they work for the government and they're part of the political class, and the political class should run everything else and get paid more money. I don't know what's happened to their children because this is 30 years has passed since I knew these people. But I think in the end, their kids were influenced to some degree by this sort of toxic culture that the media and the entertainment industry has released, and which, at least in theory, this overclass supports. I don't know how you can keep your kids away from it in the end. Although Joseph may also be right that they may try to create their own version, their own cleaned up version, of this toxic culture.
And from Joseph Jojo, there we are. Someone compared our situation with Irish absentee landlords of the famine years. Our new emperors in Silicon Valley want Harris because of her mother's ethnic background. I've no doubt that the Silicon Valley folks do want stronger ties with India, but I don't think that necessarily Kamala Harris is viewed as the nexus for that. I think they would get that whether Trump wins, whether Trump loses, and Harris pretty incidental to the whole thing. Harris is just popular with the Democratic base because she is a juggernaut of fundraising. She comes from the Democratic fundraising capital of America, the San Francisco Bay Area. Pardon me?
I can speak of this a little bit just because of my familiarity with India. And
sure. Please do.
She is not popular within India or within the Indians in America because India is a very divided country. In some ways, it's one of the great sovereign democracies, right? At the same time, and there's a lot of mixing, but there's always been kind of battles with the left in India that fortunately we don't see here. And she's her family represents kind of the thing, that element that they're still battling over there, which is the left, which is they've got a lot of historical battles. With Russia, they still have a lot of ties in with Russia. And I don't want to complexify it because there's a conversation in itself. But India is very afraid because the left is kind of pursuing them everywhere they go, and it's something we don't have here. Here we have kind of like franchises of the left, right? In India, you've got a much more persistent problem. And in India, you've got a lot of agitation that we really don't have here on real substantive people get killed type of issues. So she does not capture a lot of the Indian vote.
Yeah, but the Indian vote in the United States is overwhelmingly Democratic anyhow. They're going to vote for her because she's running as a Democrat.
It's tricky. The Indian vote, remember that Indians love capitalism, and the Indians love Space Force. Indians love technology, and at the same time, they're beginning to see a bit of bias against them within Silicon Valley. And this is not a secret. I mean, this is something that's out there, and a lot of my friends are Indian, right? And I think when Joseph and I had our conversation, I had my devotional, Indian Bhakti faith music in the background. So I don't want to mix social issues into the political and into the economic, but I will say that I don't think that you can look at these as kind of you can assume that the Indians are Democrat. There is, I hate to say a hidden Trump voter because I still don't think he wins, but people like capitalism. They truly like capitalism. Given the choice, and you can take, I can discuss it for a while, but you can take a look at the graduate students coming here from overseas. Is the ones from India, they're getting advanced degrees and they're publishing a lot of academic papers in the United States. They're staying here because they want a piece of that capitalism. And at the same time, Silicon Valley is very elitist white. I mean, it just is what it is. So, and they've presented themselves in many cases because of their need for labor, right? They presented themselves with a lot of sympathies and sympathetic to the Indians coming over here and the immigrants and their value. But at the same time, Jack Dorsey really created some real social agitation when he was in India. I don't want to get into the social issues because they're so complex and I can't really speak of them and it's not my role. But he really did go over there holding a sign that created a lot of agitation because there's a lot of political friction there with the Brahmin class and some of the other issues that are happening. And so, what he did was very anti in a way. What he did was very intrusive, and I don't think that was very well received. And a lot of those, second and third generation are now kind of regaining a little bit of their faith and a little bit of their conservatism. And I don't know because you're seeing the country kind of torn apart a little bit, and that's also what fuels that trend, right?
Yeah, I agree. I live in an area with a huge Indian community, and it is not politically cohesive. There are big differences there. Here, I would say on average, they probably lean somewhat Republican, although this year they'll probably vote Republican more than they did last time, definitely. These are recent immigrants from India, and they have a deep appreciation for Trump's relationship with the Modi government, and they also view the Democratic Party as being too friendly toward Islamic issues in many different respects. We're not going to get into them here. But the Indian community, I think, is probably becoming less and less politically monolithic over time. And I think this is just a long-term trend that you're going to see begin to accelerate this year. From Row House, do you guys find it often that disaffected libertarians come to dissident right politics? I count Murray Rothbard to Joe Rogan and Sargon of Akkad as all as libertarians who get called alt-right also. Well, obviously, alt-right applied to any of these people is a smear. There was a time when the alt-right in 2016 was a big tent that had libertarians, it had some total lunatics in it, it had disaffected populists. But after Spencer did his notorious Hale thing right after the election, and then obviously what happened in Charlottesville, it became really just something centered on Richard Spencer and others who I won't mention. So when alt-right is applied to these folks that you mentioned, Row House, it is just a smear, which is totally unsurprising given what the media puts out nowadays. But there is no question that a lot of disaffected libertarians wind up in dissident right politics. Not what could be today called alt-right, but certainly dissident right.
But they're going to destroy it. They're going to destroy it also. These are not disciplined people. Have you ever seen that guy Sargon of Akkad or whatever his name is?
Oh, yes, definitely, yes.
He was kicked off of Twitter. But see, these people that are getting kicked off of Twitter, a lot of them initially had no self-discipline. They basically hijacked a platform. They had no self-discipline. They spoke with horrible words that a person that has any command of the nuances of language doesn't need to speak like that. And so and they just had no self-awareness. And if it was a self-awareness, it was something that should have been corrected because it was delusional. And why would any party want them? Because they're going to bring anything they touch, they're going to bring down. So I like Joe Rogan because he's a Renaissance man. And I wouldn't think of him as a libertarian person. But this libertarian party has nothing to do with its, this is a mutation. I don't know what the etymology is of the Libertarian Party, but I don't know how these mutations kind of happen. But why would they embrace somebody that can't present themselves articulately? That just leads to trouble, doesn't it?
I agree, Paul.
Well, I mean, talk about people who cannot present themselves articulately. I'm afraid Joe Biden may fall into that category, and possibly Trump. I also think what we're doing is we're setting up higher standards for people on the right than people on the left. I mean, someone like Al Sharpton is an honored member of the left. I mean, Michelle Obama, whom you say you admire, has warm feelings toward Sharpton, who hardly, strikes me as somebody who engages in civil discourse. Or somebody refrains from appealing to hate, racial hate.
Yeah, but I don't want to give you the permission to reimagine the words that I use, because I think if we were to replay it, that wasn't it. So I do want to be fair that I had what I was commenting on at that time was that the pervasiveness of her book, and kind of how it just became a book of aphorisms and kind of a requirement. I wasn't speaking of its kind of literary quality. I was just talking about it, that visual, I was just talking about what it was, but it still presents the problem that these people are radioactive, and they're radioactive for a reason. And you have a conservative party right now that thinks that Kanye is some type of a solution, and he is a societal problem just as much. I mean, his wife.
I agree.
Yeah, why would the Republicans want him?
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree with you about Kanye, but I think that one of the reasons that people like Murray Rothbard, are denounced as members of the alt-right is that there are two wings of the libertarian cause.
Murray Rothbard is considered the alt-right?
Oh, yes. What has happened is that anybody who is socially and culturally on the right, as Rothbard was, as opposed to the people from Cato who are on the left on every social cultural issue, has now been relegated to the alt-right dustbin of history. Paleo-libertarians like Lou Rockwell, Tom Woods, there are lots of them out there.
Isn't a book Anatomy of the State? Wasn't that one of his books, Anatomy of the State?
Right, right.
I mean, that's like that's a handbook. That's a class. I mean, well, I don't know, whatever. That's crazy.
I agree. It is a classic. No, he's a brilliant man. I don't necessarily agree with his political philosophy, but he was a brilliant man. But because he is identified socially and culturally with the right, this makes him part of the alt-right.
Wow.
So I mean, this is where the classifications are now being used. I don't think the libertarians are a significant political factor anyhow. Cato can get by because it sometimes has interesting, inventive economic solutions that rarely get adopted. But on every cultural, social issue, it's about the same. It's about the same position as the Washington Post, possibly the Nation, with the New Yorker. It's on the far left. So therefore, it is no threat to the liberal establishment, whatever. Libertarians are unlikely to be elected to anything. I don't think they're a serious political force in the United States anymore, if they ever were.
I've watched him really deteriorate, and it's interesting to watch because it's not even a slow car. It's not even watching a train crash in slow motion. It's it's much more interesting. Right. And it's in real time, so it's kind of there's almost a whimsy to it that now they've got like a car salesman stripper or something.
Yeah, they actually had a guy running for the presidential or vice presidential nomination last time who wore a boot on his head. They are an interesting group of people, to say the least, and they're not going anywhere. I think we could all agree on that. But I think a lot do wind up on the right because they just tire of the nonsense among libertarians and they're repulsed by the left, and that's pretty much that. From top tier, pardon? Oh, I thought you were saying something. My mistake. From top tier scholarship, would a pagan, shall we say, non-heterosexual like Greg Johnson be considered left wing? It would depend on what he promotes. Top tier, being pagan and non-heterosexual, is not, doesn't make you a member of the left per se, for sure. But I think that if you do wind up supporting ideas and certain perspectives that can be thought of as politically on the left, even if you say doing it for tactical reasons, you wind up as a de facto member of the left. Now, I am not a follower of this fellow's, and I do know that I do know, though, been very cursory since they did a big falling out with Spencer.
I think we lost Joseph.
I imagine that they have some key political differences. It might have all just been personal, like I said, I don't know. But I imagine they. Pardon?
We hear you now.
I'm still here. Oh, great. My apologies. I must have gone in and out briefly. But so I think that I don't know that a fellow like Johnson's views would be easily categorizable on the left-right spectrum, but I certainly would not say he's a member of the at least what's traditionally been considered to be the Anglo-American right. Although one might say he might be on the right in more of a continental European sense, but that's, I think, sort of getting out of the bounds of what most people here would find familiar.
Joe, can I look at some questions? Would that be all right? Because I just opened up the comments and there's so much interesting. Can I highlight a couple of them that I think might be interesting?
Only the super chats. That's the sort of that's the house rule for the show. Wouldn't be fair to the people who do.
Well, so I don't know if I can't distinguish one from the other. So because I think that's a YouTube thing, and I'm looking at this. But I see somebody says, and this was kind of a beef with me as well, because I think it kind of represents kind of the instability of the Republican Party right now. Is somebody says, yeah, Kirk, I can't stand the libertarian things. And it's that guy, Charlie Kirk, I think is his name.
Right. Charlie Kirk.
And, I don't know why I like rhetoric, right? And Trump is a master at rhetoric, right? He's got the props, he's got the gestures, he's very good at it. So, I'll see 2 hours of Trump. Why not? Let him do his thing, because I'm very interested in it. But the people that he chose, I was very disappointed, because there's really no appeal for, he could have had a Victor Davis Hanson, and he could have had so many people that can speak of Trump's policies, whereas he's unable to do it in a long form. He could have had people do that. And instead he chose Charlie Kirk, and he chose some woman that was screaming on stage. I don't know what her name was. And I'm sure she's a very good person. I'm sure she's very thoughtful and very kind, and she seemed very intelligent, so I certainly don't want to say anything bad about it. But she was screaming on stage, right? And of all the intellectuals that they could have had there to be the counter that Paul and I and you have discussed, they failed at doing so. And I think that shows you where things are going. That they are holding on. They can't properly elaborate and articulate their own positions. That they had to have more of a spectacle, right? Because what else is that guy Charlie Kirk there for? And he seems like a great guy. He seems like a very nice guy, very thoughtful guy, and very intelligent guy. But this is a national stage, and Trump already has that association. So why not kind of deviate from that a little bit and show the intellectual side of what the Trump policies are towards Israel, towards India? It would have been a perfect time. Yeah,
I agree with your critical comments about Charlie Kirk, and I don't think either Joseph or I liked him very much. Yeah. I think he is a lightweight, but there is another point that Joseph raised that I think should be addressed, and I do this as an intellectual historian and somebody who wrote a book on fascism. Not all homosexuality is identified with the left. We see a certain kind of homosexual who is very effeminate, whom women love. I have daughters. They say, oh, they're so wonderful. They're kind and caring. And, the ones you see on TV. Then there are the stormtrooper homosexuals. There are the Nazi homosexual. There's the right wing. The Spartans were homosexual. Yeah. Homosexuality historically is identified with the military right, the militaristic right. Yeah. And this is what you see in Greg Johnson. And this is what you see in this fellow Donovan. It's another one. They hate women. They loathe women. They hate the female sex. Only men count. it's a very masculine culture. What was his name?
Yeah.
Mishima, the one in Japan who died, I don't know, 50 years ago, who
Yeah.
glorified
Yeah.
masculine beauty. The Greeks did. So we do not have to assume that all homosexuality is the kind the Obamas or Kamala Harris would approve of. There is the other side, one might say, the obverse side of the homosexual coin. And Greg Johnson fits that very easily. He hates women, which is a characteristic of a certain kind of right.
Who's Greg Johnson? I just don't know who he is.
He is this far right, very anti-Semitic writer, but he is a I would say he's a right-wing homosexual, and most of his sentiments and the views he expresses fit very easily into the interwar revolutionary right, like some of the fascist movements. So I think he is a figure of the right. He may not be my cup of tea as a member of the right, but I recognize him as being on the right. There's nothing leftist about the guy. And you also have people on the right who will tell you they're socialist, national socialist, or the fascist socialist or something like that.
I want to be responsive to your audiences, so I really apologize. I do want to be responsive to them because I love this stuff. So yeah.
Okay.
It's fun. Paul and I always get a kick out of it, and obviously we're very grateful for the audience we have. We have some very loyal members of it, and this is a great time for me to raise the glass to them. Thank you all very much for being here. And we have two last super chats to address. One is from, speaking of loyal members of the audience, Row House, and then followed by another very loyal member, Douglas Edward. But from Row House, the Ramsey Paul and Styx co-hosting of Happy Homelands is a good example of a libertarian merged with a dissident right guy. Agreed, Row House. And obviously that's a combination which does very well in terms of popularity and in terms of, I would say, longevity. I mean, it's not a show that just is fly by night. It's been around for a while, and they certainly do know how to put things out to people. So I have no disagreement at all with your comment. And yeah, you're right. Adam, then Paul, anything to say about what Row House brought up?
I apologize. I was scrolling through some of the questions because I really enjoy this stuff so much, and I'm so appreciative of people's participation. So I have to apologize. I actually missed that question. And
no problem. No, I'll put it up again. The Ramsey Paul and Styx, which is Styx and Hexenhammer 666, co-hosting of Happy Homelands is a good example of a libertarian merged with a dissident right guy.
I don't know who any of those people are. So
Styx is a libertarian. And Ramsey Paul, I believe he used to be one, but then he became more focused on Western culture. Neither are what are associated with the alt-right, but Row House brings up a very good point about both gentlemen. Paul, anything to say about what Row House brought up?
Yeah, I don't know the other one. The other one is not Nicholas Styx, to whom you're referring. The other person I certainly know Ramsey Paul. He is an extremely articulate, thoughtful person who does come out of the alt-right. But I'd be very happy to be associated with him, at least at this point in time. But I think he sort of ended up sort of renouncing most of the alt-right, and went on to other things. Nonetheless, he is still a marginalized figure. The conservative movement wants nothing to do with him. Because I think he's still viewed as being positioned too far on what we can identify as not the alt-right, the old right or the dissident right. Unlike Charlie Kirk, who I think is a total lightweight, but has been able to sort of hitch himself to the Trump wagon. And there was one embarrassing scene in which he was, I think, embracing some drag queen or someone in New York. Whom he was talking into becoming a Republican. Was that it? I mean, the drag queen incident, which I think did not work well for his reputation.
I think that was
just reaching a little too far.
I think it was a very bad convention. I think they had a really good opportunity, and in fact, I like, because I like being an observer of all these things. And of course, because I'm against the megacorps taking over, because I am nostalgic a little bit for the Constitution and stuff, right?
Right.
You know, of course, we're all looking for alliances to help us kind of do a little bit of to kind of reconcile and kind of mitigate what's going on right now. And sometimes I do see, Trump's tweets as being kind of ineffective, and I think that and kind of they're inflammatory needlessly, but it doesn't communicate policy. So I think that the GOP, that was such a perfect opportunity for them to have somebody better than Charlie Kirk, is really what I think. I was a little bit disappointed, and I think the Democrats didn't offer anybody, which would have made it even better for, yeah. I love rhetoric, and he's good at it. So, but get somebody else, Hansen or somebody. So
yeah, I think he was also too focused. They were too focused at convention in winning black votes. I mean, and they made it very obvious. And there was nothing subtle about it. And
I like the part with the soldiers and with him giving and Trump giving people citizenship. I thought that was good.
Yeah,
because it was a good video.
Well.
Yeah, it really was. But I was disappointed to see Charlie Kirk. So I don't think Nancy and my wife and I play Scrabble. So I think we had it on the background, and there was no reason for me to turn to the screen. I want more Kirkian junk. I love this stuff.
You were not the only one who was disappointed to see Charlie Kirk.
Really?
I was another one.
Yeah. It was a squandered opportunity. A lot of this is a squandered opportunity from my take on Trump, because we're battling the megacorps, right? All of us are kind of aligned that we might have different directions to the left and to the right, and we might have but we all right now should be sharing kind of we're all kind of getting onto the same river to get to it, and we'll battle it out once we arrive at dry land, and which is a long way from now. So I do think that that Trump should be doing more right now if he wants to put pawns back on his chessboard of really blowing up the establishment. Just blow it up. I mean, just destroy it. Right now, pharmaceutical lobbies, the pharmaceutical industry as a whole, has committed $10 billion for 2020 in advertising. This is just in America. The pharmaceutical industry does $500 billion of sales in America. And
I know.
They're committing $10 billion, and they're committing billions of dollars of that on social media, on Facebook, on the Facebook doctor group, patients groups. So when people talk about deep state, there's one way of talking about, and Paul, you've written about it, kind of the managerial state, and but there's also the deep state that are purchasing. There's also kind of the people who are purchasing the deep state, which is the pharmaceutical industry, and I see Trump should just blow the whole thing up, blow the defense industry up. If you're going to lose, start throwing grenades, man. Just start throwing.
I totally agree with you. I think he should be going after pharma. He should be going after certainly the arms industry. That bothered me. He did not explain himself well, because his point was true. It just came out in a very garbled fashion. I'm not always impressed by Trump's rhetoric. Yeah. And I think if you make a controversial point, you have to explain yourself better than he did when he indicted the Pentagon and the arms industry, and they do take money from the arms industry. That's perfectly true. That's easily shown.
Yeah. So when I say rhetoric, I don't mean that Trump is Pericles, right? So, but he's better than Obama. There's no doubt about it. But we're not, rhetoric is not only just the complexity of it. It's, kind of the delivery of the message. Take a look at the hat, the props that he used, the gestures. He's really good. He's really good at that. And even on a stage in a huge stadium, you still feel kind of a closeness to him, and there's an approachability about him. So he is good at that. It's just that you only want to see that on stage for 1 hour. He's like Bill Clinton has that thumb. Everybody knows the way he uses thumb, and every politician since has tried to kind of replicate that type of, that gesture. Trump has his, even on Twitter, he'll say sad, right? With he created that.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he really is something else in his own way. He's very energetic figure who endears people, and that certainly kept his political fortunes afloat. From Douglas Edward, this was going to be the last one, but there are two more that just came in, even though I did the last call a while ago, but we'll take them all the same. From Douglas Edward, is it possible the Democratic Party transforms into something like the PRI was in Mexico, an effective one-party technocratic state with no ideology? Very much so, Douglas Edward, even though there will be, I think, intense warfare between the various factions of the political warfare, I mean. But I think, yes, I see that the Democrat Party can become something like the PRI. I don't know that it necessarily will, but I do think the potential is there. And it already has reached this in places like New York and California and Illinois, where it has total dominance. So the answer to that is yes, emphatically yes. Adam and Paul, anything to say about what Douglas Edward brought up?
No, I don't think I could. I wouldn't place a bet on me being able to find Puerto Rico on a map. So no.
PRI, they were the ruling political party in Mexico for generations.
Okay, I thought
Partido Revolucionario.
Yeah. So if it was Mexico, then I stand corrected, which just shows you I would not bet on me being able to find that on a map either. So no,
no problem. Paul, anything to say about what Douglas Edwards?
Yeah, one problem that I have with that is that the Partido Revolucionario in Mexico was an extremely conservative party, although it was anti-Catholic and anti-clerical, and if I'm not mistaken, supported the left in the Spanish Civil War because it was of its anti-clericalism, but it was quite conservative in other respect. I mean, it was sort of a kleptocracy. You had the same people in power. They sealed the borders. They did not want people coming up from Guatemala or anywhere else. And economically, they were both corrupt. They were corrupt and didn't do that much. Except divide government assets among leaders of the party, but they did not have the cultural Marxist edge that I see in the Democratic Party right now. That didn't exist at all. They were simply a kleptocracy that stated the institutionalized kleptocracy that claimed to come out of the revolution of 1910 or something like that.
But is this really a cultural Marxism? I mean, is this something that's that friends of mine would kind of describe as a whole bunch of insurgencies battling it out and mimetic warfare and emergent type of things, all battling it out? It just seems that cultural Marxism was 2 years ago with AOC, and now she can't even catch up. She had a baton of the cultural Marxism. They ripped it out of her hand, and she's trying to chase them down.
I agree. It's moving so fast, but if the Democrats win in the presidential race, they're going to have to control it. Otherwise they'll be simply be overtaken by their own mobs.
And from Wojak Woes, the reason why Trump chooses these clowns like Kirk is purely for optics. He accepts that most people feel and cannot intellectually engage with Victor Davis Hanson. I agree entirely, Wojak. That's a very keen analysis of the situation, and I have nothing to add to it. I will just say that it's very good, very good. I concur wholeheartedly.
Why would you concur with that?
Because I think it is clear that Kirk appealed to a certain sort of campus conservative that is sort of the intellectual descendant of the Reaganites who had a campus presence back in the day. And these people are not going to relate to Victor Davis Hanson, even though Hanson obviously is a very good writer and he's intelligent.
Then Trump cannot win. You've answered your own question. Now your question should be, why isn't Trump you may be asking yourself, why aren't I 50 points ahead? So now you've answered your own question. Why aren't I 50 points ahead? If the reason being is that his audience couldn't identify that, then he is contributing to the misconception, and that's a real problem.
Trump often does contribute to misconceptions about him, no question. The thing of it is, Biden is even less relatable, which makes the election interesting, to say the least.
He's got all the political apparatus, but Biden has all the political apparatus. He's got all the surrogates. He's got all the proxies of government. So Biden is just already assumed to be a ventriloquist dummy sitting on the lap of the megacorps. That's already understood. That's already kind of decided. So there's no reason to try and interrupt that kind of fallacy, right? The fallibility of that, of having that negotiation with a committed Democratic voter, because that's already understood, whether it's willing to be expressed or it's just something that's kind of resonant in the back of their head. So I just think that I think that people should be asking themselves, why aren't they 50 points ahead? And if it's the reason, well, that Biden is experiencing, and I believe personally that he's on a cognitive decline. And it's very unfortunate because it's not a pleasant thing to observe, right? Because we're all people and we all understand, the impermanence of us all. And they did the same thing to Bill Clinton, right? They shouldn't have done that because, you gotta allow people to carry their, to be dignified. And, but it just shows you that Trump should be substantially ahead. But, if his theory is that that Trump just needs to kind of restore his committed GOP voter who might have swayed, or he just needs to remind them of Make America Great Again. There's a big difference between Julius Caesar conquering and Julius Caesar being able to administer. And it was really Augustus who was able to administer and who kind of architected all the propaganda and kind of did all that. So, at a certain point, people should really be asking themselves, why isn't Trump 50 points ahead? Because it really is a problem. Because if the argument is that these are the Biden rioters, I can't say that that's, persuasive because, they've, the Democratic Party is now trying to chase these people to catch up to them. It's just that they have leased the Democratic apparatus. They've leased the, clearly the oligarchs have leased the industrial activist complex that the Democrats have a monopoly on, right? They've leased that architecture. They've leased the infrastructure. But that's a given. So, I think that it's not a successful thing to say that those are Biden's rioters. It's not a compelling argument. The compelling argument is for someone like Victor Davis Hanson, who's been very, probably his most assertive supporter of certain policies, I suppose, to get on stage, because the Kirk voter is already assumed. We already know he's there. We need the intellectual who's going to be able to take kind of the Trump incoherence on certain policy issues and his own kind of whoever speaks in his ear, last is the winner of the. And he needs to be able to take somebody who can make those really substantive type of arguments. And now I've seen, and I discussed this with Joseph for a while because I've been kind of clocking everything that's going on. I'm very fascinated by this fastest roll-up of power of history, and also because I look at these cycles, these are kind of these episodic bursts of news and how they have just controlled the frontal lobe and how media has taken over all the real estate here. And it's very difficult to, rent a shop in the mall of a person's head, right? There's, it's not available for rent. So in any event, I'm cataloging all of this and I'm chronicling all of it. And these are like episodes. So right now you're seeing kind of, all the GOP voters are excited to see these protests and they're excited for this. And they think that that's some winning ticket. So they'd like it to continue. I don't think that's helpful personally because these things are episodic. And you're going to see, and I clocked them on Google Trends against each other. So they really are episodes, just like a TV show. They're cycles. These are very deliberate. And so what you're going to see is now you're going to see, and people, so what's happened is also you're saying, hey, you know what? People are seeing the riots and, now there's going to be some type of a reality that's going to interrupt that feedback loop. And I'm saying, no, it's not going to. The Biden riots is not persuasive to anybody. So and next month, just as right now, the GOP is kind of excited and they're saying, look at these riots and this is, the Biden, and this is a compelling argument for somebody to switch parties. But the reality is, next month you're going to see another, or next week you're going to see another news cycle and another news cycle, and the news that you're embracing today, right? You're embracing today's home run, and it's not going to win tomorrow's ball game. The game starts all over again. So there's no continuity, to that. And Charlie Kirk is just an example of that. It's whatever, but you got to be 50 points ahead, man. This is no joke. This is you got to knock out Muhammad Ali, and he's up against Muhammad Ali, and you can't let it get to the judges.
Paul, anything to say about what Bojack brought up before the last question from Rojas?
Well, I really don't think Trump could be 50 points ahead, given the monolithic, powerful opposition that he faces from educators, from the media. Even I turn on my local weather station and they engage and they rant against Trump. Everywhere you get this. I walk out of my house, and the left is very, very well coordinated to do this. The point that Adam makes, that's perfectly correct, and in fact, I never thought about this before. Is that Biden does not even have to exist. He has all these surrogates and assets. Nobody cares if he croaks in his basement or what the hell goes on there, because the party and the media and everything is at work 24 hours a day, for the anti-Trump candidate. That's all you have to be, is the anti-Trump candidate. So it really makes no difference what Biden does at this point. I agree with that. I never thought of that.
I never expected
that's a very good point.
So going back to some of my tweets, because I know everybody wants to get off, but I get kind of excited about this. Going back to March, I was saying that that Biden is not going to participate in the debates. I'm going to be shocked if he does. I would never debate against Trump because he's best on the attack, right? He's a good fighter. He's one of the best fighters on the offense, right? And on the defense, so why would Biden open up his left flank and his right flank? There's no reason for him to.
That's correct.
If he doesn't debate, the only people who are going to be upset with it are the Trump voters already.
Exactly.
Voters are going to say, why should he debate this guy?
I've been saying that Biden's not going to debate for weeks now, and I get pilloried for it sometimes, but I'm firm in my perspective that he will not wind up debating. I don't think there are going to be any debates. And there's a last question from Rojas, but I don't know, Paul, did you have anything to say about what Bojack brought up?
No, just please go on and ask the last question. We've been on 2 hours.
Yeah, it's been an outstanding 2 hours. I've really enjoyed it.
Can I answer a question? Do I get to answer one question? Do I get to see one more question?
Yes, absolutely.
I'll answer it quickly, but it's important because I think people make mistakes. And again, it's these decision rules have gotten crazy. But somebody asked, have I been, red-pilled? No. You can't. If you want to win, you have to win within a structure. You can't win from the outside. It's a lot easier to rob the bank for the teller to rob the bank than it is for somebody to come in at 3 o'clock in the morning and kind of take down all the security and then have to break the code for the safe and do all that type of stuff. I don't understand why people are so eager to kind of classify as a red pill, or I think it's actually kind of in a way insulting. As though a person has to be one way or the other, and people don't work that way. So, if you, and I've listened to Paul a lot, if and Paul and Chris Hedges and a lot of people agree, sometimes you got to blow up a system, but you can't blow it up from the outside, right? Mm-hmm.
And from Rojas, quick for the panel, thoughts on Z-Man of Z-Blog. Very good historical analysis he has, Rojas. He's a brilliant guy, and he's been on the show before, and I look forward to having him back on, hopefully very soon. I'm sure Paul feels the same way, but obviously I'll let Paul have his say before we go. But anything to say, Adam, about what Rojas brought up?
No, I must defer to Paul, of course.
No, could you please distill that question, from all the surrounding or circumlocutory commentary that you were providing. What exactly is the question to which I'm supposed to respond?
Quick for the panel, thoughts on Z-Man of Z-Blog?
I usually find him extremely provocative, and I was delighted to have him on our program. See, there's another person I think who is still associated with the alt-right, although I don't think he's easily classified. I like Joseph Cotto, I'd be delighted to have him on our program again.
He doesn't identify that way, but you know, as Paul said, almost anyone who folks don't like in the media can be have that slur thrown at them. Very few people identify as alt-right today. Pretty much only the Spencer fanboys. Anyway, we are finally done. This was an outstanding conversation. Yeah. Very strongly enjoyed it. I will just say in my parting words before I let Adam and Paul speak, and then we vamoose, that I think that in any election season, he who has the most motivated voters, or she, I don't want to be accused of sexism, wins. And people tend to vote in favor of someone in terms of what makes them motivated to go to the polls rather than voting in opposition to someone. And that is very often, almost always indicated in primary voting returns, far more accurate than polls. And if you look at polls, I'm not going to say all of them are wrong, all of them are BS. That's not true. It just isn't. But the most accurate subset of public opinion polling and private opinion polling is the enthusiasm gap. And since 2004, at the very least, whoever is ahead in that gap winds up winning the election by however small a margin. It's almost like a mystical thing at this point, but it is true. So I think that this stuff never really goes away. It doesn't matter what party you're talking about, doesn't matter which candidate you're talking about, doesn't matter which year you're talking about. I think this is even beyond politics. It's just part of human nature. So if one looks at any election season, those are the things you should be focused on. And everything else is, I mean, there's still a lot of other important things, but I think those are the brass tacks, the fundamentals. And like I said, that's not partisan. It goes beyond left and right, Republican and Democrat. Really, it's just part of
human nature. Let me ask you guys both one question, because it bothers me a little bit. It's actually kind of two questions, right? Which is, number one, what would you, let's say Biden won under unusual circumstances, okay? By your definition, or by some type, there's a consensus that shares that definition with you, that it was unusual and requires some type of interrogation. What would you do?
Well, there's nothing you can do. You have to let the legal system handle it.
Okay, so how do you feel satisfied with the way the legal system has resolved some of the outstanding issues? I mean, we've seen a lot of corruption within the DOJ and FBI that's gone unprosecuted, right?
No, I'm not satisfied. Generally speaking, it's sort of really hit or miss, but there are a lot of issues there, no question. Really, obviously, depends on who's doing the investigation.
So let me ask you guys a question. It's the last question, I promise. It's part two. Is do you think that, and I don't know the answer to this. I wonder about these things myself because I'm a futurist, but I am also very interested in how this future. Do you think that all the apparatus, the tens of billions of dollars, if not the trillions of dollars, because they all want to open up the piggy bank of the U.S., the Medicare system, everything else, do you think that all of this extraordinary effort and all of the damage that they have done to kind of the moral fiber of the country and the cohesiveness of the country, and that, Paul, things can kind of be remedied a little bit by a Biden civility or a Kamala Harris civility might remedy that a little bit, at least in appearance. Do you think they've done all of this for nothing?
No.
Are you asking me that question? No, I do not think they have done this for nothing. Nor do I think that Kamala Harris will be very civil. I just think that she will have many problems to deal with on her side of the aisle in order to contain the left. There's a point that Joseph raised that I think Adam has already answered, and it's a good answer. Bringing up this enthusiasm gap may not be very important, since people do not have to be enthusiastic about Biden to vote for him. They're voting for him because they hate Trump. and they're voting for him because they want to bring the counter-revolutionary left to power. And I would not underestimate the power of hatred. And the media has whipped up tremendous hostility against Trump in the last 4 years. And I'm also impressed by the ability of the Democrats and the left to manufacture crises every 10 minutes. Trump brokers some historical agreement between the Israelis and the Arabs. So what do we hear? That he said this to Bob Woodward, or he said this to the military about the military, which nobody can really prove.
It's amazing.
Right? It's just Jeff Goldberg at the Atlantic, who hates Trump and is a leftist who's sort of trying to get back at it. But it's all orchestrated because every single minute they can do this until election. And when they're not doing this, they'll have riots on the street, which they'll blame on Trump.
Oh yeah. So I was showing this to Joseph. I was showing him a time chart, right? I showed you a little bit of my timelines. And in that timeline, weren't you surprised that in January, since January to now, how much has happened? We had Soleimani die, right? Then we had the conflict with Iran in January. Mm-hmm. We had the Mueller testimony. Mm-hmm. I think we had the Mueller testimony. I think Jeff Sessions was 2018. We had Soleimani. So we had Soleimani killed. We had al-Baghdadi, right? We had the conflict. And there was probably about 15 type of things that I charted within my timelines because it's too much for the mind to comprehend. So these people do not remember yesterday. I'm very interested in it. And I quiz people. I don't interrogate them, but I'm very interested. I ask them what they remember of 2019, what they remember of 2020. They only remember some emotional output that they had. They have they're not willing to, there's no intellectual effort whatsoever. It's just whatever file card they have back there, boom, that's it. It's interesting.
People have short attention spans, to say the absolute least.
But these are smart people. It's not that they have short attention span. It's that everybody basically has a gun to their head, and either you're going to give up your wallet or you're not. And you've got a split second to make that decision. And because that's what the media is doing. The media is making you make these, apply all your dichotomies and every single decision rule you've got and every single way of simplification of complexity, but they're making you do it within a fraction of a second. So you've got to decide your tribe within a fraction of a second. So as soon as Paul saw that they said it was an alt-right, that person adhered to his tribe. That was it. Nothing else to talk about. That was it.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
No, it is the power of narrative. There's no question about it. The question is how many people believe in certain narratives. That's obviously something to get into here tonight. I will say we've gone so far over that we might have reached the far side of the moon by now, but it's been an outstanding conversation. Adam, really glad you were able to come on. I do want to thank people who just watched, people who participate in the live chat, people do the super chat. I raise my back to you. Thank you very much. All outstanding stuff. And I also want to thank Adam for inviting Paul and I on his Periscope streams. I think that would be great. What happened? All an outstanding conversation.
I had two things going at once. I'm sorry. And Joe, I can't hear you, but I did hear you say inviting you guys. Yeah, it would be my pleasure. I mean, this was certainly an enjoyable conversation. And I like the conversation with Paul, and he can give us so much history and the historical record, which I think is so important to all of this, that we don't lose context, that there's a history. And and Joseph, it's so admirable. And we were discussing this before, and such a wonderful conversation. And I appreciated your time.
I appreciate your time too, and I'm sure Paul does as well.
Yes. You are not related to the Lord Townsend, who was the Tory minister who gave us the whatever the act was, the Tea Act or the Glass Act or whatever led to the American Revolution. The Townsend Acts were the ones that produced English tariffs on American goods. You have the same name, but you're not related to this venerable gentleman.
My family, each generation of my family has been the black sheep
Okay.
that lineage. So I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm all self-made, and I don't really. I found that inquiring too deep into my lineage is very unpleasant and brings up a lot of pain for others. It's interesting though, but no, every generation has been a black sheep, so probably not.
Well, that is interesting. That really is. Black sheep are always they go against the grain, obviously, and they don't teach us just think about themselves, but about the time in which they live.
Well, it's good in a way because it's good when you get out of school early, and you realize that you don't want to be indoctrinated, because there's a certain point when you realize that the more you're in school, the more you're kind of having to conform to their ideas and to their you have to conform to them. So I wanted to get out. I wanted to go to Wall Street, and I was happy to do so. And I wish kids would do that more. I wish kids would get out of school and get a job first, and then figure out what education they're going to need and backfill it. I think we're losing that in America.
As a professor for over 40 years, let me assure you, you made the right decision.
I did. I did.
Leave college and go to Wall Street.
We were talking right before this because our son, it was just such a smart kid. I'm so impressed by him. Was a PhD that as his initial interest as a PhD, and it took him through 3 years of school until he learned to appreciate money a little bit more. And it was was post-Enlightenment German philosophy. And
that's my interest.
I know. And I had such an interesting conversation with him 2 days ago where we're discussing so much of this, and I knew very little about it. I mean, I know a lot, in fragments, but it's just incredible, and it's so informative to where we are now. And there's just so much stuff going on that.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting, and he got out of that in his third year. He got out of that because he saw what was happening within the profession, and
it was terrible.
And he didn't want to go the adjunct route, and it really is.
Oh, it's awful.
I know.
And they're also crazy professors. I mean, it's what they do is they flood their students with their own poisons. It's almost impossible to study German philosophy without being told that all these thinkers were racist or Nazis or something like that. I mean, if you can study them on your own, that's fine. Does he read German?
I don't know. I know you do. I don't think he does, and I can't speak to that.
Okay. But anyhow, he has moved safely beyond that particular obsession. Okay.
But so I was so interested in conversations about kind of the meme-ish things and things that are happening culturally, and it happened into one of the conversations that we were having via Zoom. I miss him; he's in Montreal, and he's really smart. And we were just discussing all of his background in philosophy and how everything kind of comes together, and how education has always been this historical battle, and how it's just really interesting. And so that's it, whatever that meant. But I was happy to get out of school because they were trying to indoctrinate me, and he was happy to get out of his program because then he would have to conform to that as well, I suppose, right? Which is kind of a cruelty in itself.
The whole world in regards, and academia is one of the first that come to mind if you go against groupthink. It's Paul knows it better than I do, but it's my father, actually retired sociology professor. That was his last profession. He had quite a few, but it's unfortunate what's going on in academia. That's a whole nother episode, but unfortunate to say the absolute least. But what was very fortunate is that we're able to have the conversation. Really enjoyed it once again. We do have to go now, but I want to thank everyone.
And I want to thank you both so much. This has been wonderful speaking with you, and a very pleasant exchange. Thank you all. Thank you everybody for participating and asking questions. I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and obviously we'll be speaking with Adam again. That goes without saying. So I do look forward to future conversations.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. And I'm not sure if you're going to hit the leave button or I hit the leave button or we hit it.
I'm going to hit
We'll all hit
broadcast.
the leave button simultaneously.